So today's session is the hidden cost of running a nonprofit business and how to cover them. Now, the topic is a little bit misleading because they're only hidden if you don't really understand that a nonprofit is a business. But I'm going to jump into that. Um, Today, we're going to cover the costs that are not typically covered in a grant budget, how those uncalculated costs perpetuate the nonprofit starvation cycle, which we do not support, and how to cover the hidden costs. At any time during the presentation, if you have a question, you want to share, you want to make a comment, just let me know because I'm a talker, y'all. I love what I do. For those of you who have joined me for the first time, do we have any first timers here? Okay, great. My name is Amber Wynn, and I'm a 30-year nonprofit veteran. I have been everything. I've done everything from emptying the trash to giving out 7 million annually. Been an executive director, programs administrator, a grant writer. My largest grant is $3.2 million, and if I mentioned, a funder. So I get to leverage that experience and meet with you guys every Thursday to share some of that experience. I think what's important to understand is that, um, I'm trying to come at it from different perspectives and share things that maybe grassroots nonprofits don't get to see from a funder. So I like sharing that part from a funder's perspective. So just feel free to ask any question. But for some of us, when we first started our nonprofits, either as a founder or just coming in as an executive director, we had all of these amazing ideas about what we would do. We would serve our community, give back, we'd share our passion, and we'd make a difference. And if you're like most nonprofits, or people who start nonprofits, you do it because you have a passion. And like most nonprofits, you don't really understand all of the inner workings of a nonprofit. So someone probably said to you, "Oh, the stuff that you're doing, you can get a grant for that." And you're like, "Really? Yeah, 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 yeah." And so that's what you did. You started your nonprofit and you thought, "Oh, the money will come." And now you're in it and you're like, "Where is that money?" And so a part of that is just misinformation, right? Believing that you can fund your nonprofit off of grants. And the reality is, no nonprofit can survive off of grants alone. It's just impossible. And I'm an amazing grant writer, and I say it all the time. No nonprofit can survive solely on grants, right? Why? Because it takes time to write those things, right? 20 to 100 hours if you don't have a boilerplate um, proposal, 6 weeks to 12 months to award. If it's a foundation, they tend to, turn them around relatively quickly. But the reality is, there's no guarantee that you'll get the funding, even if you're writing grants every day. There's no guarantee. And if you're paying someone to do it, that can be quite expensive. Paying a grant writer to write grants that there's no guarantee that you'll get. In terms of, sustainability, grants are a challenge because you can only get a certain percentage for the most important part, which are the salaries, right? So that prevents you from really being responsive, right? And so when we think about grants and how they are positioned to support your organization, really only 35% of your budget should come from grants. If you are surviving off of 80, 90% grants, you put your organization in a very precarious situation. We found that out during the pandemic, right? So just like an organization can't solely survive off of grants, they can't solely survive off of events. Why? It's a lot of time investment, right? Um, you've got to round up all of the stuff you've got to do. There's some people who can put on an event in 2 weeks. That's just what they do. But for most people, it takes you a year to do a successful event if you're doing a gala or something like that. You got to get the venue, you've got to get the entertainment, you've got to have people who are going to help you roll out this event. it's just time consuming, right? You got to have entertainment, because if you're doing the same gala every year, doing the same thing, people aren't going to attend. So you got to do something different. And then in terms of sustainability, it costs. I myself am not a huge fan of events, but again, everybody has their own forte. I don't like the big events because you've got to put so much upfront money. You got to put down the deposit. You've got to, pay for the entertainment. You've got to do the decorations, and then, at the end you recoup afterwards. It's just a lot of energy that's going in. And then the other thing is, in terms of revenue, if you're doing galas, you have to sell tables, because at the end of the day, funders fund programs, not events. So people are like, oh, I'm going to have this gala. And funders don't want to fund galas. That's more along the corporate sponsorship. That's more along ticket sales. So it's a hustle. It's a lot of work. So it's really difficult to sustain your nonprofit solely on grants and solely on events. You mix them up. That's what you want to do. But here's the other thing. In terms of funders, right? It is not the purpose of a funder to fund your organization, right? Let me rephrase that. The purpose of a nonprofit funder is not to fund nonprofit organizations. And people look at me like I have three heads when I say that. The purpose of any foundation out there, any government agency, is not to fund your organization. Their purpose is to meet their funding goals, right? And if you look at it from that perspective, it's going to shift a lot in your organization. When I learned that, when I understood that, quite frankly, my grant writing success went up, because a funder's purpose, and they report to the IRS, is to meet their funding goals. If it's to end hunger, that is their purpose. How the nonprofits come in is that a funder is going to partner with a nonprofit to help them reach their funding goals. Does that make sense? When you look at it as, I have this nonprofit and I need a grant, then that relationship becomes, you should fund me. That relationship becomes, write a check for grants, write a check for salaries, write a check, and that is not the funder's purpose. A nonprofit is a business. When you establish your organization, the first thing you do is you incorporate as a business, right? 501c3. The C stands for corporation. Your initial incorporation is as a business. It's when you get the tax exempt status that you let the world know the type of business you are. We are a tax exempt business. So all of that means something. And sometimes if you don't understand that, you're going down this path and you're like, why is this not working? Why can't I get this money? What's going on? And it's because of this, because a nonprofit is a business. And once you understand that, now you understand how to operate within the nonprofit sector. Now, I'm going to show you this video that talks about the reality of our situation as a nonprofit.
There's an unfortunate perception among donors that overhead, the cost of running a nonprofit, is a problem. Conventional logic is that every dollar spent on overhead takes away from programs and the people the nonprofits serve. But you and I know that overhead is vital to a healthy and sustainable nonprofit organization. What we require is a new way to communicate the true cost of programs and the vital importance of strong organizational infrastructure. So let's retire the old, inaccurate pie chart. Direct expenses, shared costs, fundraising, administration. It's really a slice of all of it. That's the true cost of programs. And this is our new vision for communicating this truth. Rather than thinking of our investment in key infrastructure as diminishing our programs, it should be seen as valuable core mission support. All of the resources we need to accomplish our programs are part of the true program costs. When a program is underfunded, the expenses not covered include a proportionate share of the core mission support. That leaves a gap in funding for finance, human resources, governance, and fundraising. This weakens the organization and its capacity or ability to deliver high caliber programs. This is a revolutionary new way of understanding and communicating about core mission support and the true program costs that are vital to our organization's operation. Without core mission support, all of the organization is weakened. So it's true that the strongest and most effective organizations have the strongest core mission support.
All right. So that is the conversation that's happening more and more from advocates of nonprofits. And it's true. The reality is, if you don't have qualified staff, then you don't have, innovative programs, because it's the staff that's actually delivering the programs. However, having sit in the funder's role, I want you to consider something. I knew that was going to happen. To consider something else. When we say a nonprofit is a business, from the funder's perspective, the reason why we only want to fund programs is because a business is your responsibility, right? A business has business expenses. They have taxes, they have filing fees, they have insurances. And as a funder, my purpose is not to fund your program. My purpose is to have my funding goals met. I am going to partner with you, meaning I am going to fund the program part so that you can help me meet my goals. It is your responsibility to fund the business part. And so there's a big disconnect between the nonprofit sector, as in those that are doing the work, versus those that are signing the checks. But the reality is there are more funders who believe that their responsibility is to fund the programs, and it is your board's responsibility to fundraise to cover the business expenses. So I'm going to operate from that position, because until there's this shift where funders start to give more of the operational costs, you're still left with how to cover these other costs. Any questions about that? All right. So when we say a nonprofit is a business, just like a for-profit, there's administrative costs, human resources costs, accounting costs, marketing costs, and fundraising costs. Well, maybe a different type of fundraising cost for a for-profit. They would probably just put that in like R&D, research and development. But for a nonprofit, we have these costs. Now, I have $20 for a person who can tell me what an indirect cost is. Anybody want to try? Okay. Go ahead, Roger.
Yeah, indirect cost, if I'm correct, because of our lifeline, will be costs or outside, like what we would look for is unrestricted funds to come in and do things that are part of the vision, but they're not funded by the grant.
Okay, that's really, 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 really close. You have
Okay.
half. Yeah.
This is all new for me, but I'm learning.
No, that was good. Anybody else? Anybody want to take a stab? Okay.
I have an answer.
Okay, go Lakeisha.
Okay, for me, what I consider indirect costs is things like operating costs. So like for our paper, our printer, those type of things are kind of indirect costs that we don't really account for when we're writing grants.
Okay, that's part of it. You guys are good. You're good. Anybody else? Joe.
It's costs that are not directly going to that objective or object or of that. So it's if that makes any sense. So it's counts. It's directly that not accountable to that objective. So
Okay. Yes.
it directly is coming from an indirect way, but it's not directly at that project or that object, if you will.
So indirect costs are known as overhead or facilities and administrative costs, and they are the cost of your organization that is not directly tied to the program. So it's the expenses that an organization would have even if there were no program. So when people try to put in rent, you can put a portion of that because if you're providing your after-school programs in your facility, you can charge some of that to it. But the reality is, whether or not you have a program, you still have rent. Electricity, you can charge some of that to the program because, again, if you are providing program services after school or during the day, whatever, you're using some of it. But the reality is, whether or not there's a program, you're going to need electricity. Some program positions, for example, if you have tutors, those are specifically for your program. If you didn't have the program, you wouldn't have the tutor. But your executive director is going to be there whether or not there is a program. So that is an indirect cost. The indirect costs are those expenses that exist whether or not there are programs. That's the easiest way that I've been able to explain it. When people say, oh, well, the copier machine is going to be there whether or not you have programs. But in some instances, you can charge a portion of those fees
You
to.
froze up, Amber.
Huh?
You froze.
Froze. Am I back?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. What I was saying is, some people may say, oh, well, a copier machine is an indirect cost because whether or not there's a program, the copier machine is there. But if you're a good grant writer, you can say, well, a portion of that copier machine fees can be charged to the program because we're making copies of flyers to do outreach. So it just depends. But the reason why I'm bringing up indirect cost is because these are the ones that are mostly hidden, right? I have another question for you. What percentage of the nonprofit budget can be allocated to administrative costs? Is it 10%, 80, 65, 25, or 40%?
I would say 65.
65? Anyone else? Come on, Jeanette. I see your lips moving. Tell me. 25? So the rule, go ahead. Go, Lakeisha.
Oh, I was gonna say 10%.
Okay. So the rule is, you can charge a maximum of 25% of your budget to administrative costs for funders not to look at you side-eye. But the reality is, most foundations in particular will only allow you to charge 10%, right?
Wow.
Yeah. Government, sometimes it's a little bit higher. They'll allow you to, to charge a rate that they've already established. It varies. But generally speaking, if you go to GuideStar and this is how they rate you, right? Are you fiscally sound? Are you responsible? If your budget exceeds 25%, you're going to go down. If your budget is 25% or smaller, then you're going to go up. You are top status. What is it? What's over gold? Platinum. You're platinum if it's, under 25%. If it's 25%, you're gold. And that perpetuates the starvation cycle. Because as we know, if you don't pay your people, then your people are going to quit. And then when the people quit, then those other people are taking on the work of those other people. And then you just get this high turnover rate. So that is the starvation cycle. And so that's why today I am talking to you about how to cover those costs. Because what we don't want to do is burn out our people. What we don't want to do is provide subpar services, and they are all intricately connected.
Hey, Amber, I have a question.
Yes,
Can you see me?
I can.
Uh,
Why? You can't see me?
No, my screen just went black. And I don't understand because the light's on.
No, I can see you. Keisha, can you see me?
I can see everyone that's on camera.
Okay.
Let me go back out and let me come back in.
All right.
All right.
So when we talk about indirect costs, when we talk about indirect costs, their salaries, here's a very big one, especially if you're writing grants, you will see this. Fringe benefits. Fringe benefits are not vacation, dental, or medical. Fringe benefits are those taxes that your state requires you to pay as an employer, as a business. And oftentimes when you're writing grants, in particular to foundations, if you don't include these, and sometimes they don't allow you because, it's that 10%, but it's FICA, Medicare, Social Security, SSI, workers' comp. Those are mandatory. They round about 15.1%, right? And so I always implore my, when I'm writing my grants, I always include the fringe benefits, in particular for government grants. Government grants will allow you to include those fringe benefits. And if it's not prohibited in a foundation grant, I'm going to encourage you to include it, because this is how it goes. The foundation says, how many people are you hiring for this project? You say 3, and you put them in at 50,000, 30,000, 20,000, and that's it. But when it's time for you to provide the reports, the only way you can provide the report is if you have a system, a payroll payment system. So you get ADP, right? ADP costs, first of all. So there's an expense. But on top of that, this fringe benefit, they're going to automatically take it out because it's mandated by law that employers, if you have W-2 employees, that you pay them. So that $50,000 position is now 65, because 15.1% on top of that 50%. And so now you've got this grant for $250,000, but you've got these 3 positions that you did not charge the fringe benefits to. And so now you're in this poverty cycle, right? And so I have this all the time. Amber, I'm writing these grants, but it's just not stretching. I don't know what's going on. And I look at the budget and I'm like, you did not charge the fringe benefits. You have to charge the fringe benefits to the grant because it costs to hire people, right? There's the cost of the fringe benefits that are mandatory. They don't come to you, they go to the state because you are a business as an employer. Even if you have 1099 employees, you've got to pay the payroll service for that, right? Because at the end of the year, when you're doing your taxes, so those costs need to be included in your proposals. You've got to read it though. You've got to read it. There are some that's like, that's a business expense. We are only committed to funding the program. You need 3 people to run this program, but we are not going to cover your salaries, or we're going to cover a portion of your salaries. Then also, the nonprofit sector has the highest turnover rate. You know why? Because we work our people hard. And we say, do it for the mission. Do it because you love the people. Do it because you love the community. Or it's because we're only getting these $5,000, $10,000, $25,000 grants. So we're piecemealing, right? So then we only get them part-time. So then they don't have benefits. And so at some point, people's hearts give out to their pockets, right? I have bills to pay. And so you're not giving cost of living increases. As we see, I don't know about y'all, but my Popeye's chicken is no longer $7. It is $13.79, and it hurts my soul. And so inflation is inflating, but our salaries are not. And so people have to do what they have to do. And so you'll find them quitting. I just need more money, and you can't give it. So one of those hidden costs is the cost of living, and your people are entitled to COLAs. They are entitled to cost of living increases. How do you do it? When you write a grant and your budget is $70,000, when you write that next grant, write that budget for 75 or for 80 or for 90, so that you can continuously give your people cost of living increases. Write it into the grant, especially if it's a government grant. One of the contracts that I have is for Cal State Fullerton. It's a university out here in California. And the standard practice is year 1, whatever the salary is, and then every year subsequently, they include a 3% cost of living increase. You include it in your budget. And that's how you continue to keep your people happy and loyal, because they see a 3% rate increase, then they know that you're taking care of them. But more importantly, after taxes is only going to be 22 cents, but they see that you at least tried, and, the cost of living increases in their paycheck. But it is one of those hidden costs of running a nonprofit that I want you to be very cognizant of, right? The fringe benefits and the cost of living increases. Any questions about that so far? Christiana, you asked what's a high turnover rate? Right now, well, right after the pandemic, it was like 43%. 43%. That's like almost half of the workforce, right? Yeah, that's pretty high. And the statistic also showed that 63% of the current executive directors said that they felt burnt out and they were planning on leaving the sector in the next 15 years. That's huge. But it's hard work. You guys know that. You love your people, you love your community, but it is a hard push being an executive director. Now, when we talk about program costs, these are the things that a funder is okay with funding, depending. And I say depending because when you look at consultants, it depends. A grant writer is a consultant, and a funder is not going to cover your grant writing costs. But you can get a nonprofit consultant to come in and do training on like accounting or something that's going to increase the capacity of your staff, and they would approve it. Some funders won't cover the cost of food. Now, in our communities, we know this is how, number one, we get people in. This is how we fellowship, we break bread. And depending on what type of services you provide, I know for youth development, when I was with Girls Inc., we fed our babies. Sometimes that was the only meal they had in the day. So that was a part of our program cost. But in particular, on some government grants, they will not allow you to charge food to the program. So program costs are those things that are specifically required in order to implement the program. Now, when we look at the budget, this is how I want you to view it. The top part are the indirect costs, your administrative costs. Then below that are the program costs, right? So the indirect costs are the salaries, the benefits. The direct costs are your activities, your supplies, your vendors, your contractors, and that's how much it costs to run your organization in its totality. When we talk about those hidden costs, this is the area that we were talking about before. Visually, I'm a visual learner. So indirect costs are those associated with the salaries and the benefits. But let's look at an actual budget that I made up. At the top, you'll see the indirect costs, right? Here, those benefits, that's $11,570. Think if you didn't put that in the grant, where are you going to pull that from? I don't know about you guys, but when I was an executive director, I did not have reserves, right? And so we've got these positions because we've got this new program, because we got that grant and we were funded and we're so excited. But then when it comes time to pay for these benefits, I'm like, what are we going to do? Another one that is hidden is insurances. This one in particular. Now, having been a funder, I can tell you this is a business cost. It's called Directors and Officers Insurance, D&O insurance. But you need D&O insurance because D&O insurance is the insurance that's going to protect your board. Now, follow me with this. You want high-powered seasoned board members to help you fundraise. That is their job as board members, right? To set the vision for the organization and to fundraise. Make sure that all of the things that's going on in the organization are above board, ethical, and all of that. But one of their primary responsibilities is to fundraise. I would consider myself high-powered and seasoned. I'm just in experience alone. I won't say that I'm highly connected, but if I were on your board, here's what I could contribute. I could write some grants that would set your organization up powerfully. Here's the thing about that, though. If a person is on the board, on a nonprofit board, their assets are not protected. They are functioning as the leader of the organization. So you need directors and officers insurance to protect their personal assets. When people have asked me to sit on boards, I ask them for their budget. And if I don't see directors and officers insurance on there, you will not have me serving as your board member because you're not protecting my personal assets. That is an hidden cost because you need to have seasoned board members. Otherwise, you're going to be writing grants and your corporate sponsorships, and you need partners to help you fundraise. And that is the role of the board. You want seasoned people, not people with good hearts, people who love the program. No. You want people who can pick up the phone and say, hey, we need a venue for this event, or hey, we need a line of credit, or hey, I need you to get me this, proposal, blah, 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 blah. And the way that you do that is by making sure that their personal assets are covered. So directors and officers insurance, a funder's not going to cover that. The other thing is marketing and advertising, especially in this environment, right after the pandemic. There's been a shift in the way that nonprofits really engage with their audience. Yes, we're in person, but because of the shutdown and everything going virtual, there's this expectation that you should have followers, that this is the way that you communicate with, your constituents. And a funder is not going to cover your marketing and advertising. That is a business expense. But if you're trying to pay for a social media manager, that is going to be an indirect cost, because whether or not you have a program, you're going to have social media, because it's about promoting your organization. So that would be considered one of those hidden costs. And then again, when we go to the consultants, accountants, IT people, grant writers, web designers, those are all indirect costs, unless, like, for example, let's just say for your IT person, you have different sites and they have to go out and set up things for your program. Your grant writer could probably make that, something that could go on the program. But generally speaking, your consultants, unless they can make them be vendors, are going to be one of those hidden costs. And so now if you're listening, all these hidden costs are kind of adding up, right? Yeah, right. Look at these numbers: 11,000, 1,000, 50,000, 35, 36. That is a lot of money, So what do? Well, here's the challenge. You can write 70 grants. Those grants are typically restricted. Restricted means when they give you the grant, you can only spend it on what you wrote your proposal to cover it for. One of the biggest challenges with nonprofits, people who don't understand the nonprofit sector, is if there's a shortfall in your salaries, you cannot just take it from your grant money. That is called mismanagement of funds, and you can get your tax exempt status revoked for that. And people are like, well, what are you talking about? When you get a grant, you can't just throw it into your bank account and it becomes a slush fund. Your funder said, I am giving you $250,000 to do STEM. That means you said you were going to go to these museums, you're going to work with these engineers. That is what the money is for. Well, my grant for this person's salary, stopped, and they're on this program, so now I need to use it. You cannot. Look, I retract that. You can, if you write to your program officer and say, hey, we've had this shortfall. Would it be okay if we reallocated some of those funds for X, Y, and Z? Sometimes they will approve it. But I'm saying what you can't do is just do it nilly-willy. You have to get approval. The bottom line is 90% of the grants that we get as nonprofits are restricted. And because of those restrictions, it puts you in a pickle when it comes to shortfalls, right? As a nonprofit, you guys, you have filing fees. I don't know if you know it, but for example, on the federal level, the IRS expects you to file your 990s. That typically comes with a fee. You have to pay an outside CPA to verify that the way that you're running your organization is GAAP approval, generally accepted accounting practices approved, right? Has anyone paid an accountant recently to do their 990s? Anybody? Not yet? All right. Well, okay. Christiana, if you don't mind sharing, how much was it about?
Maybe $3,000.
There you go. Bam, bingo. $3,000. It depends on the size of your budget, right? But like, it's going to be between $3,000 $120,000. If you've got government grants and multiple grants, it can get up as high as $20,000. And guess who you can't charge for that? You can't charge that to the grant. That is a business expense. And here's the other thing. If you don't have audited financials, it's going to be a challenge for you to get that big money. You can get those $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 because they're like, okay, we can write that off. But when you start applying for 100,000, 200, 600,000, they want audited financial statements. So you've got to pay that consultant, that independent person, that CPA to go through your paperwork and say, yep, they're functioning as a viable nonprofit. $3,000. Unseen hidden costs, but it's a business cost. It's a cost that you need to pay in order for you to potentially get more money in. State franchise tax board and Secretary of States, they also have filing fees. Every 2 years, nonprofits are supposed to file what's called a statement of information. It's not a lot. In California, it's about $30. But if you don't file it, guess what? On the state level, they're going to revoke your tax exempt status. The Secretary of State. So remember when you formed as a business, and you're saying, I'm going to hire people, then you start to report to the employment department because payroll, those mandatory taxes, they come through your state franchise tax board. So they're looking for their money. And if you don't file, then they're going to then penalize you. On the local level, how many of you are fundraising? Doesn't matter what you're doing. If you're doing GoFundMe, if you're doing casino night, all right. If you are fundraising in your state, you are supposed to register with your Attorney General's office. It's called a Registry of Charitable Trust. Because they're gonna get their money too. But you are a business, and as a business, it is the Attorney General's responsibility to make sure that you are functioning as a viable nonprofit. So if you're fundraising and you're not registered in California, again, it's $30,000. For those of you who heard about Black Lives Matter, they were in the newspaper and they're like, oh, they're mismanaging funds, and it was because they had not filed with the local Attorney General's office that form in the Registry of Charitable Trust for $30,000. And the Attorney General said, if you don't file in 30 days, we're snatching your tax exempt status. $30. But as a business, you are required to file. And these are costs that most of us don't even know about going into, running a nonprofit. But if they find you negligent of filing, then they have the authority to take your tax exempt status away. And without your tax exempt status, that's what a lot of people are looking for, that tax write-off. Or as a funder, because they report to the IRS, they can only fund people who are tax exempt. So like I said, for the IRS, those 990s can cost anywhere between $3,000 to $20,000, right? For your business taxes, for the state, the payroll taxes are a part of that 15.1%. And if the fundraising that you do does not completely align with your mission, you could be charged for unrelated business income tax. What does that mean? That means you have a youth development program and you decide to sell hoodies to fundraise. If you generate too much revenue, then the state franchise tax board can say that has nothing to do with your mission, so you need to pay taxes on that. And you're like, what are you talking about? We're fundraising to fund the program. According to the rules, this is how you determine if your fundraising directly aligns with your mission. If the mission says our purpose is to strengthen youth development, is to create healthy relationships, break the cycle of youth, whatever, that is your mission. Your mission is not to sell merch. But if you say in your mission, the purpose of our organization is to give kids viable skills that will lead to a productive future, you can make that work, because you teaching them how to sell, create a business plan, right? Then you can tie it into it. But if you're just selling merch, or if you're just getting corporate sponsorship, that could be taxable. So you just have to be careful. Any questions about that? That one usually trips people out. What are you talking about? It is supporting my mission. We're fundraising, just to, no.
What, I have a question. So what if your fundraising efforts are through another entity? For example, we partner with Armark to man the concession stands at the stadiums, and it's a fundraiser for us. And we raise a lot of money doing that. Is that, I mean, we don't have to register. It supports our mission because it's raising money for our programs, but it's through like a third party.
Yeah, but the funding is what they're looking at, not how you do the funding, right? So what's your organization, Lakeisha? What's your mission?
Say that again?
What's your mission?
Struggle of Love.
Yeah, what do you do though?
So we provide wraparound services for youth and families, and it's inclusive of a lot of different things that support the needs of the community.
But what I
food
would say to you, if I were your grant writer, I would say you need to start peppering in language in your program description that says you are providing your constituents with job skills.
Yes, we have that verbiage
Okay.
in there. Mhm.
So then that kind of covers you, because if they're going to work at these stadiums to generate revenue, then you're teaching them skills. You just happen to, pair that with fundraising. So you would be okay.
Okay.
Amber.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the exact kind of what we are doing Lifeline, is that we have a part of the business both with Pathfinders, and we also are doing merchandise, but we're doing merchandising where we're incorporating it to teach the kids a business.
There you go.
And so we have them working, plus the kids are coming in and doing community work in the building. So we're able to do that because of that. So it really caught my attention, because we do try to do some fundraising for things, like you're saying.
Yep.
And I'll have to ask Leo and Hector about that taxes, because I'm not sure if they're doing that. I'm sure he is. He's doing that pretty well. But one of the things we try to do is we're trying to get the kids having a career or get business skills, job skills and stuff like that. That's one of the things we're doing. So it's very interesting that you brought this up.
No, it's important. And here's the thing. People say to me all the time, well, I've never been dinged. Okay. I am a rule follower, because it's okay until it's not. Black Lives Matter was bringing in all of this money, and it was okay until it was not. And so my thing is, it's important for you as executive director, founder, program manager, whatever your role is, to know the rule. Whether or not you follow the rule is up to you. But if you are put in front of some type of judge or whatever, they're going to look at you and they're going to say, Miss Lakeisha, that was your job to know that. The fact that you didn't know means absolutely nothing to me. And so that's why I'm sharing it with you, right? If you're like, oh my goodness, we're just selling merch, or we're doing these casino nights, and here's the thing. 9 times out of 10, you won't, right? They don't have the manpower to manage all of our nonprofits. But if someone is upset with you and they send you to the attorney general, then it is what it is. And you'll have to pay a fine on that and all that kind of stuff. So my role is just to make you aware, and you can go back and say, let's look at our fundraising. Let's make sure that what we're doing ties into our mission, like for real, so that we won't have to pay this unrelated business income tax. Because that, to me, that is a hidden cost that most nonprofits who are just grinding, doing the work, would never think about, because they're not selling merch so that they can go buy Rolls Royces. They're selling merch so that they can, pay for food for the babies, right? So just wanted to throw that out there so that you guys are aware. And then filing fees for the state. As I said before, the state is the entity that authorizes whether or not you are in good standing on the state level, and you have to file the statement of information every 2 years. Again, in California, that's $25, $30. But if you don't file it, when a funder does its due diligence and it says at the state level that your tax exempt status has been revoked over $30, that is a business expense that is important for you to pay because it can prevent you from getting your funding. As a funder, my due diligence is to run your tax that's why we ask you for your number, because we run it. And if your statement of information isn't filed, if you haven't filed your 990s, any of those things come up, then I am not going to fund you, because then you put my funding goals in jeopardy. Any questions about that? Okay. So when we look at operations costs, we've got payroll taxes. How many of you do bonuses at the end of the year? Any of you? It's something that I encourage nonprofit leaders who are struggling with bringing in like big dollars to do, because it helps your nonprofit staff to feel, special. And it's cheaper than giving raises. I know that's mean to say, but I've been an executive director. So during Christmas, like I say to my board, listen, we've got to give these bonuses out. It's $500. And they're like, $500? I said, it's $500 once, as opposed to $500 every paycheck. Put it in a cute little box with a cute little bow. Your president can come out and say, we appreciate you so much, right? You got to show your people that you care for them. But it is a hidden cost, right? Those cost of living increases, those merit increases. Your people have worked hard, and they get tired of hearing you say, well, we really wanted to give you a raise this year, but we can't. Those merit increases are important, and that's why I said they need to be written into the grants. Insurance, we talked a little bit about that. Directors and officers. General liability insurance is huge. I used to say, especially for the youth development, I don't know about y'all, in California, it is a litigious state. If you sneeze wrong, they're trying to sue you, right? And it doesn't matter if you're a nonprofit because people are trying to come up. So having general liability is a business expense to protect the organization. And guess what? In most instances, a funder will not cover that. Sometimes, like in youth development, kids go on trips, and so they'll let you cover a portion of it because they recognize that it is a cost that is only there because you have this program. So it just depends. Fundraising. Funders do not cover the cost of your fundraising. So that could be a grant writer, a development team. People always want to, we need a development director. Well, that's a business expense because the purpose of the development director is to raise funds. As a funder, I'm seeing that as your responsibility because it's shoring up your organization and not mine. These are all hidden costs that can add up and really break an organization if they don't prepare for them. And then, as we said before, marketing, social media, photography, you can get away with it because basically they're taking pictures to demonstrate the impact of the program. So, but social media, not so much. That is a business cost. So how do you fund these hidden costs? Because as we see, they're quite a bit. It's one simple answer. You diversify your funding streams. If you have been just writing grants, it's not enough. If you have just been doing fundraisers, it's not enough. You need to diversify your funding streams so that you can cover these unseen costs. I'm going to start with in-kind donations. How does in-kind donations help you cover general liability? Well, if you can get some of your expenses donated, let's just say maybe every month you spend $2,500 on copy paper, making it up, I have no idea. If you can get that copier paper donated, then that frees up money in your budget. And now you can pay for one of those, hidden costs. Individual donors and major donors are huge. People think that grants are the number one way that nonprofits are funded, it's actually individual donors and major donors. When you look at the research, you'll see that the majority of nonprofits are funded by 69% individual donors. So what does that mean? That means you should be putting your energy in where most of the money comes. Instead of writing grants, you should be creating campaigns that engage your audience. The easiest one I can share with you is an electronic newsletter. How many of you guys have a quarterly or annual newsletter? The newsletters are amazing for nonprofits because back in the day when I used to be responsible for the newsletter, I had to create the articles and then I had to go to the printer and they had to typeset it and then we had to print it and it was a huge cost. But today we have Constant Contact and MailChimp and all of the other email systems that will not only allow you to create newsletters, but they connect it to your social media. The purpose and the beauty of these newsletters is that you get to engage with your potential individual donors. People say, how do I increase my individual donor base? You create sexy stories, right? You talk about the successes, you highlight your staff, you highlight people who've graduated from your programs, and you show people this is the impact of what we're doing here, right? Amber came into the program. She was from the foster care system. She'd been in 15 homes. She just was like, I'm done. We put her in this program. Now she graduated from high school. She's on track to college. Her major is neuroscience. Like, who's not going to be impressed with that? What happens is people start to click on the stories, right? So let's just say Joel clicks on that story about Amber. And then the next email, he clicks on another success story. And then the next email, he clicks on another success story. The metrics behind that shows you what your potential donors are interested in. So if I were the executive director and I saw that Joel is consistently looking at these success stories, as a development officer, or if we don't have one, as executive director, I'm going to reach out to Joel and say, hey, Joel, I see that you're really interested in our success stories. And he's going to say, yes, you guys do amazing work. And I'm going to say, yes, we do. Would you be interested in supporting? And he's going to say, actually, I would. So then we have lunch and then I create this whole, engagement opportunity for him, but you've got to engage them. And Constant Contact and all of the other email programs out there have metrics in the background that lets you know what people are interested in, what they're donating to over time. And that's how you increase your individual donor engagement. Yes, Roger.
Yeah, good. That's a great thing that you're sharing there because we just recently this year, I had brought it to the executive director's attention, says, why are we not doing surveys from our participants when they get halfway through the program and then when they end the program, and on top of it, getting them to give what we would call as a, not recommendation so much, but a story.
Testimonial. Absolutely. Yes.
Yes.
The testimonial. Absolutely.
Yes, the testimonial. And they have a picture usually like myself and my participant together with that. And we're posting them on our websites, but also in the building. So when they walk into the building, people can walk around the building and see these testimonials with our pictures in it and the picture of the participant and what they thought about the program. Now, at times you may get somebody who has a bad attitude. That's going to happen.
Life. Yeah.
That's just life. You can give them everything and still not going to be happy.
Right.
But we are starting to do that this year. So it's amazing that you brought that up because that's one of the things that we were talking about and how it gets the attention out there. What are we doing? That's the qualitative work that they want to hear about, not just quantitative. Okay, we're serving 100 people or 200 people, whatever. What's the quality of that? And that comes through with these testimonials and these surveys that we have that we're able to put online.
Absolutely. And the other thing about Constant Contact or whatever is you can do videos. I have my participants all this. Oh my God, Amber is so amazing. What can I do to support you? A video, make it under 2 minutes, and you throw it right there in the Constant Contact. People like emotion. People connect with emotion. So those newsletters are an amazing opportunity for nonprofits to really build out their individual donors. For those of you who have buildings, even if you're leasing, naming opportunities. Now, this is going to sound a little bit whatever, but research has shown male donors tend to like to see their names on things. Female donors tend to be more into like programming and the emotion, but men, they want to see their name on something. So if you're trying to create major donors, that's one of the things you can say. You can say, hey, we've got this computer room. We'd love to, put your name on it, right? The Amber Wynn Computer Lounge. You can put a naming opportunity for anything. You've seen it. They have benches. It has a little plaque in loving memory of. We've done things. We've created like a tree out of construction paper, and we had leaves, and we did a whole campaign. Please, help us, solidify our roots, or grow whatever. And you give $50, you get a leaf. Like, that doesn't cost anything. I've had people who are running transitional homes or group homes ask people to sponsor a room, right? If your people are coming in and they're staying in that room for 6 months or a year, this is what you say. We'd love to name this room after you for 1 year. If you, donated $25,000, in front of that door, it's going to have, the Amber Wynn and, Charles Wynn, I don't know, abode, I don't know, whatever. But it's going to cover all of the cost of a person staying for that period of time. Naming opportunities are huge because people want other people to see that they're contributing, right? Contracts, much like a grant, you can engage in a contract, subcontract. Of course, there's the gala, advertising. So advertising as in sponsorships. Hey, we'd love for you to sponsor this program. We'd love for you to sponsor this field, whatever. Branded products. When we talk about merchandise sales, that is passive income. You put it on your website and you say, "Go Lions," and the money comes in. People get to support your organization. They get to demonstrate their pride. It is a revenue stream. Even if you get $500 a month, that's $500. You can cover the statement of income. You can cover, all of those little fees that were mentioned, right? Passive income. So what would be passive income for a nonprofit? Again, when you're doing your newsletters and you're saying, hey, people, if you love what we do, click here and donate. That's passive. You didn't have to do any additional work. They just click. People will do newsletters and never give people an opportunity to support. You've just done a success story. They watch this video, they're inspired. A little button that says, keep up the good work. Click. That's passive income. You didn't do anything. What else? Board dues. For those of you who have people on your board who love you and appreciate you and support your mission, but do not give, you need to thank them and start rotating them off and rotating on seasoned board members who understand that their role is to fundraise. And a part of that is a give and a get. The give is their financial board dues. The get would be some of those in-kind things. They're going to get you services, or they're going to fundraise to sell a table. But board dues are important because they are unrestricted dollars and they help you to fill those gaps. And if it were me, this is what I said to my board. Listen, right now we are functioning solely off of restricted dollars, so I cannot pay the officers, directors and officers insurance. Guess what they did? They made sure we had enough money to cover the officers and direct, because it covers their personal assets. Corporate sponsorships, we talked about that. But of course, at the end of the day, grants, 35% of that. This is how you are to cover those hidden costs. It can't just happen with grants or expenses. You've got to have revenue coming in from different places. Every nonprofit should have at least 10 streams of revenue. What we learned from the pandemic, if you just have 1, 2, or 3 and something shuts you down, you are done for. But if you have 10, 3 go away, you still have 7. As my daddy say, you may not be kicking high, but you still can kick, right? So we want to make sure that when we talk about business expenses, that they are covered. And if you have multiple streams of revenue, that is how you do it. Here's your fundraising formula. 60% of your revenue should be restricted funds, and then 40% should be unrestricted. Why is that? Well, because we want to make sure that your programs are covered. Restricted funds cover your programs. Your purpose is to be a public charity. So your focus is going to make sure that those programs are covered. But you need at least 40% of unrestricted dollars so that you can be agile, so that you can cover those hidden costs. And unrestricted funds would be how you would cover those. What does that look like? Well, when we talk about restricted dollars, from a funder's perspective, we look at that. When we look at, your sources of revenue, if you only have restricted dollars, there's a high likelihood that we won't fund you. Why? Because there's a high likelihood that you're going to take the money that I'm going to give you and use it for something else, because all you have are restricted dollars. But if you have unrestricted dollars, then that says to me as a funder, okay, well, then they have somewhere where they can pull money from, right? So restricted dollars says to a funder that you're stable, your programs are covered, you can accomplish your mission, and there's going to be consistency in the community. Unrestricted dollars says that you have agility, you can cover your operational costs, and there's a higher likelihood that you won't tap into the restricted funds and you can weather the unforeseen. So this is the standard formula that we use in the nonprofit sector from the accounting part to see if an organization is what we consider stable. All right, so to conclude, a nonprofit is a business. It's just a business with a philanthropic purpose. And as such, it has business expenses, right? Taxes, filing fees, insurance that you as the organization is responsible for covering. And the way that you do it successfully is by diversifying your funding streams, making sure that you have ample amount of unrestricted funds to complement your restricted funds. That's not going to happen just from grants. It's not going to happen just from galas. It's going to happen because you have multiple streams of revenue that you can tap in to cover these specific costs. And I believe that's it. Yes. Yes. So now I'm going to open it so that you can ask your specific questions. I try to leave at least 20, 30 minutes for you guys to ask specific questions. But Joel, if you want to take down this email, Mason has the library of all of the videos, including this one. So if you would like to get a copy or access to it, that's the email that you would reach out to. After this, in every webinar, I send out an evaluation just to see if my content helped at all. If not, you have an opportunity to say, hey, Amber, cover this. Hey, Amber, cover that, because I want to provide you with information that's going to help you either as a nonprofit leader to strengthen or to help strengthen your organization. I have the best job in the world. I get to support the most amazing people on the planet, my executive director. So I just want to make sure that the information that I'm sharing with you is valuable. So any questions? What we got? Anybody?
Can I, on your honorariums,
Uh-huh.
explain that to me, please?
So if you ask somebody to come in and share their expertise, let's just say you're doing job development or whatever, and you're trying to expose them to non-traditional careers. This person will come in and talk and say, well, this is my story and this is how I get in. And if you're interested, make sure you take these classes, whatever. You would offer them an honorarium. People like to call it a stipend. It's an honorarium because if it's under like $500, they consider that an honorarium. It is a love offering. And typically only give it because it is enhancing your program. The difference between an honorarium and a stipend, like you could give a tutor a stipend because a stipend is ongoing, but an honorarium is usually like a one-time. You would give it to a facilitator a keynote speaker, somebody just gonna come for one time and share
Right.
their knowledge and
Right.
expertise.
They're not actually a part of the organization per se.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay. That's helpful. Yeah, it's interesting you talked about the 60/40 because we had been doing that in the past, and now just this year we're having to kind of hustle to get more unrestricted funds in because of that very thing that they want to see that you have the money to pull from,
Exactly.
which is a part of a growing corporation, growing business. Our vision is enlarged, and so therefore our approach to things is having to transition as well.
And it goes back to what I said about really understanding that a funder's purpose is not to fund your nonprofit. When you look at it as a partnership, it's like being in a relationship. Like, my job is not to take care of you. We two grown adults, we're gonna be in this relationship together. So what are you bringing to the table? Like, that's how we should look at our relationship to funders, right? What is it that you're getting from me? What they're getting from nonprofits is they are not equipped to do the work. They just have the money, right? So you say, I am the most qualified organization. Pay me and I will help you accomplish your funding goals. That's the most healthy way to look at it. When you're like, give me the money, give me the money, give me the money. It's like, so that's the purpose of that sustainability question. That one came up like the late 2000s. Listen. If I don't continue to fund you, how will your organization continue? I was a funder and someone said, I'm going to apply again. No, boo boo. Now, what that feels like is you expect me to take care of your organization. So, we're looking as funders for partnerships with people who they're doing the work. They don't mind doing the work. They understand what doing the work means. And the other thing is, no one wants to hitch their wagon to a sinking ship. So when you're writing, don't write doom and gloom. Without your money, we can't provide the. No one wants that. They want Kobe Bryants. They want winners. They want 6 rings, right? So you should say, our girls are amazing. Our people are this. They're accomplishing this. They're accomplishing it. And with your support, we can do even more. With your support, guess what? We're going to take this STEM program that we were just doing here locally. We're going to expand it. We're going to expand it to other communities who need it so we can really change this community, right? We're going to partner with engineers and then, so they want to partner with people who are on the rise. It sounds counterintuitive, right? Because you think, well, if I'm doing so great, why would they want to partner with me? They want to partner with you because their job is not to fund your organization. Their job is not to come in to save you. They are trying to partner with someone who can do the work. So if you're telling me your doors are going to close if I don't give you any money, then I'm not going to put my money into a sinking ship. Does that make sense? Yeah. So one of my successes as a grant writer was because of that. I did not do doom and gloom. My girls were not at risk for anything except for success. My girls were only at risk of becoming the most amazing women in the universe. Like, I didn't do that stigmatization, and the funders loved it. So that's a whole nother tangent. I don't even know how I got on that. Any questions about
I
the
have a question.
Okay.
So, and I missed a tidbit of the presentation because I was interrupted. I apologize for that. And you might have talked about this, but as far as savings, and so when we have unrestricted funds, especially during like Colorado Gives Day, it's like a huge fundraising day for organizations, and we take those funds and put them into a savings account to build up for the purchase of a building. We're trying to purchase our own location. Is that okay? And then how do we then go and use those funds that we've been saving over these years to fund some of our initiatives like the building cost and other programs?
So what I would say about the building fund in particular, if you have a development person, you should create a capital campaign. That is a campaign specifically designated for buildings. And the reason why you want to create a capital campaign is because it comes with certain perks, right? So let's just say you have $25,000. Then you can go to a foundation and say, we have fundraised for the last 3 years and we have $25,000 for our capital campaign. Will you match it? Because there are foundations out there that just match capital campaigns. The reason why they're comfortable with doing it is because a capital campaign is put into like a savings, like a bond or whatever, and they will add to it. But most people, you have to start it. They have to see that you have put forth, the effort. So I would create a specific capital campaign and then just have a specific campaign to reach out to all of the foundations that fund capital campaigns. How do you use it? Well, there's two things. You can take a portion of that money and put it in an endowment. An endowment is just like a CD, and you just live off of the reserves, right? So it's invested, but every month, and you live off the reserves. Or if it's unrestricted because you've just been fundraising, put aside a portion that says reserves. And funders love to see reserves. People are like, well, if they see I have reserves, are they going to give me money? Yes, they will. Because now they know that you are a business and you've stocked away some money for those rainy days. And if push comes to shove, if some type of something happens, they know that you're going to pull from those reserves and not their restricted funds. So it looks good.
So you want to show that in your budget when you're applying the reserves? Okay. And then how do you find, well, this is probably off subject, but I don't know, how do you find those organizations that will match a capital campaign?
Google, you say capital, capital campaign, comma, whatever your zip code is, comma, foundation. And it'll go bloop, 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 bloop. These are some good questions. And I'm just going to reiterate because I'm Amber. Having audited financials are really paramount in moving your organization to the next level. And this is where your board comes in. You say to your board, we need $3,000 to do these audited financial statements because 60% of the people that we've been applying for require audited financial statements. They need to know that if they give us $250,000, we have systems in place to verify that we are operating as an ethical nonprofit. That is the responsibility of your board. You know what I mean? I've had people say, I can't afford that. And I say, you can't afford not to. Too many organizations require audited financial statements. And if you don't give them, that kind of says something about you. It doesn't say anything about your work ethic. What it says is that you don't have the infrastructure to provide me with, at any point in time, reports on how you're managing my money. That's what the audited financial statements says to a funder. Yes, they have, financial systems in place. Yes, they've managed there's been no mishandling of the funds or whatever, and it gives your funder confidence to write that check. And here's the thing, the organizations that require those are usually the ones that's going to give you big money. So if you're challenged and you're in this nonprofit struggle, look at that. Look at, okay, 5,000, 10,000. When you get to that level, now, if you only have under $50,000, no one requires you to have audited financial statements. It's when you start bringing in the big money that they, require that. So if you're under $50,000, you need to worry about it. But when you talk about long-term sustainability for your organization, it's starting to get that big money. And when you start to get that big money, it comes with more monitoring. Yeah, they want to know that if they give you this money at any point in time, they can say, we need this financial statement so they can see what's going on with their money. But it ain't cheap, y'all. I was like, how much? $5,000. My goodness. Okay. Hey, board, we need y'all to raise this $5,000 so that I can apply for this $600,000 because I'm tired of writing these $10,000, $20,000 grants. you know, because it's, in my opinion, the effort that you put into those 10, 20, $50,000 grants, it's the same amount of effort that you put into the 250. It just takes you 4 more days, but it's the same effort. I'd rather get the big money, breathe, than keep hustling for this little money. It's just too much work. Just my opinion.
Amber, you're in California, obviously.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah, with the Latino Coalition that we work with, the umbrella that we set under, we have our funding coming out of the CDOC budget, Department of Corrections, as well as Latino Coalition, and they do audits, they do requirements of what is our quantitative work. We have to have a certain amount of assessments and outcomes percentages being matched. 60% on employment, 50% on let's say accreditations and certificates and certifications, so much percentage on how many enrollments we have, success rates, what's our recidivism rates. There's a lot of things that they require us to have a percentage met. If we don't get that, we will lose some of the funding.
Yeah, it's
from that.
important. And here's the other thing that a lot of nonprofits don't recognize. Funders report to the IRS.
Yes.
Funders report to funders, to their board. So for government funds, it's taxpayer money. So when the president gets up and says unemployment is down by, and it's you guys doing the work. So they have to get the data, right? So when you're providing them with the numbers of people who graduated and the number of people who've been placed in jobs, that then goes to the funder, that then goes to the agency, that then goes to the president. And collectively, the president gets to say, we've made great strides in this country and da 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 da. But it comes from our work. But if it's taxpayer money, there has to be some accountability. And so when people are like complaining, I'm like, well, what, do you think people are just gonna hand you money and there's like no accountability? It's as a taxpayer, I want to know what's going on with my money. I'm not just handing out money and like, oh, well, we don't know what happened to it. No. What's going on with my money? Because quite frankly, you can keep that money in my paycheck and I would be happy. But if it's coming out, what is going on with the money that you're taking? So it makes sense from a business perspective. And there has to be systems in place to make it all work. And audited financial statements and reports and hitting certain marks is how they're able to justify getting the money, because some of it is earmarked, right? And for spending the money. So when you're in it, it's hard because you're doing the work and you're doing the work and you're honest, but people don't know you. And the only way that they can get to, checking off the boxes is if you give them what it is that they need. Yeah. Yes, Lakeisha.
So I have a question about funding. So when you're applying for a grant, I need to hire for a position and there's 2 funding opportunities available that would cover the cost for this position. So I apply. Both of them are successful. How do you handle that situation if you get both of the funding opportunities to hire for this position?
Legally, you're supposed to reject one. I never did though.
Well, we're just gonna hire 2 people since we have funding from 2 sources. But then, like you said, that adds a lot of extra work too, and reporting and requirements and all this stuff. And so that's where I'm at. Like, should I reject one? Should I hire 2 people? How should this play out right now? Because it was unexpected.
What I would recommend as your grant writer, if you get both of these, I would write to one of them and say, hey, we are trying to create continuity and consistency in this program and in this community. Historically, we start because of funding. We have been blessed with getting, the grant. We would like to extend the length of this engagement. So it would say something like this: the Amber Wynn Foundation has also funded this program for 2 years. We would like to hire this person for 4 years. Would you be open to, funding this position from this contract period, right? So
Mhm.
to see if you can like stretch it.
Right, right.
Yeah, so that way
That's
you don't have
difficult.
to, yeah, huh?
I said that's difficult because a lot of the funders, you have to spend your money by a certain date that, as part of their requirement, like they have to give the money out, but it also has to be spent by this deadline.
For
So,
su- for sure, for sure. However, my mama told me, girl, you can sell sand to a beach. And when you use language like, you know, lack of continuity, inconsistency, da 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 da, nothing hurts to ask. I've had funders be like, yeah, okay, I'll go for that or whatever. So it was just something that I threw out. I've asked funders for some remarkable stuff, and they're like, okay, Amber, just try it.
okay, thank you.
Anybody else? You guys have been amazing, and I love your questions. I hope you're able to join me again next week. I'll be here Thursday, bringing some more love to you guys. But again, during the evaluations, if there's something that you would love for me to cover, just let me know because I'm happy to cover that too.
So Amber, you said you recorded this, right?
Yes.
Now, for my director, Hector, when he comes back, I have to bear with me sometimes. Technology is a little bit on my weak side. So I want to get his opportunity for him to see this recorded. Where would I go on that?
So you would email Mason. Let me put that back
Which
up.
I've got that on there. I've got his
Okay.
email.
Yeah. So you'd say, hey, Mason, can I get access to the recording from October 5th? The title was, hidden costs.
Right.
And then
Okay.
just give the link to the Google Drive and you'll have it.
Okay. Thank you so much for that.
And you can get copies of all of the ones before. And when you're doing laundry or you on the treadmill, you can listen and watch.
How about if I'm working out?
You can do that too. All right, guys. Thanks so much for spending your Thursday morning with me. I appreciate you.